Well, hello, fellow climate-changing friends. My name is Jen Herdina, and I am in Winona, Minnesota, and I'm presenting today on the Minnesota moose. It's a really sad story, honestly, but basically here it goes. I'll try and keep it short because I'm sure you have other things to do, but here we go. The Minnesota moose, trying to cope with climate change 1 degree at a time. The reason that Minnesota moose are so important is you really can't come to our state without being swept up in the craze all about it, basically. You go up to northern Minnesota where they live, and that's the big thing. If you go out hiking, people want to know if you saw a moose out on your hike, and unfortunately that's becoming more and more rare as a sighting, but there's Minnesota moose everything. So this is kind of a quick little glimpse of our world here. Not only is it fun for hikers, but the hunters definitely love moose as well, and of course a moose burger is a little tasty treat. Personally, I've never indulged in, but I'm sure others have. So, all right, a little bit of background about our amazing animals here. It is the largest animal in Minnesota, and it's actually the largest member of the deer family, in case you didn't know that. Moose prefer to live in a young forest habitat, so that's really kind of nice after like a logging incident or forest fires, things of that sort, or a mix between the woodlands and farmland area. They are vegetarians, and they are non-aggressive unless it's a mother around their babies, and they are prey to wolves, bear, and of course hunters. So, what have we been seeing in Minnesota that has caught our eye is really just the Minnesota moose population is going down very dramatically. If you look at this graph right here, you'll notice that based on the DNR surveys, based on aerial surveys that they have done, you notice that there's a strong decline in the past couple years. And if you update this and look at the 2013 count, that's not on this chart, but I've updated on the side, the current count is actually only about 2,700 moose right now. And look at that, if that's kind of quite a drop if you look from 2012 to 2013. So obviously there's a major problem going on at this point in time. What we've seen so far, the main problems for causing the decline, and I'm sorry about the sad pictures, it is a sad story. Basically the temperature's been increasing in Minnesota over the past 50 years. It's not really a newsflash considering the world trends. But as the temperatures are increasing, the Minnesota moose are having a really hard time maintaining their own temperature, kind of maintaining homeostasis. They really struggle to maintain the cool temperatures for their bodies, and they usually like to cool down using the bogs, but the bogs are starting to dry up now, so it's becoming harder and harder to cool down. So as the animals are starting to overheat and they face heat stress, they're actually starting to look for shelter instead of food, which is leading to a problem with malnutrition. And as you can see from this picture here on the right, it's a sad picture, but the warming trends are now making ticks and other pathogenic insects able to survive longer, basically meaning that there's more of them out there, and a typical moose now can be infested with 50 to 70,000 ticks at a time. That is really causing the moose to then use trees and other things to rub their body to try and get all of these insects off of them. And if you look at the picture on your left, you'll notice what that causes is all of these bare patches then in their fur. So this is all related if you just kind of look at what all the little pictures are, or excuse me, all of the points are getting at, is that there's an overall dramatic change in temperature, and all of these little pieces add up to one thing, and it's the climate change that's happening in Minnesota, which is now causing all of these health issues for the moose. They're not able to cope with the temperature change, they're not able to cope with the pathogenic bugs, and when the temperatures do eventually fall, they're not prepared for it anymore. They're malnourished, and if you look at that picture, you can see that their fur is not going to be able to protect them from the cold when it finally does arrive. All right, so looking at what's been happening, due to the temperatures increasing, the overall habitat of the moose is dwindling in Minnesota. Minnesota is on the very southern range of moose habitat, all in general. So basically now as the temperatures are increasing, that southern border is now pushing further north. Summing it up, moose have critical thresholds for their bodies. As it is increasing in temperature outside, they're having a harder time cooling down. And basically what this data is showing is if increasing temperatures are the cause for the decreases in survival, the decline of the population will take place even more rapidly. And the data definitely backs that up. So here's an example of some data collected from the Minnesota DNR, and this is showing the temperature changes. You can see the trend line is pretty shallow, looking from the past 100 years, but looking at the past 30 years, that trend line is increasing, and that's showing again the overall increase in temperature in Minnesota. So what are we doing about it? The Minnesota DNR is definitely one of the organizations leading the charge. So they have a widespread collaring research protocol in place. A lot of organizations are helping them do this, but they are collaring several moose at whatever they can see, and they can track them. They do a lot of aerial surveys, and the collars basically announce to the researchers when the moose has not been moving for the past 6 hours. And then what they do is they respond to that notice, go out, take blood samples, and try and determine what is causing the deaths of the moose. Based on this research so far, you can notice that a lot of what they've discovered is disease-oriented, again, relating back to the ticks, malnutrition, etc. You'll notice that there's a small amount of poaching and also vehicle collisions. They both, take up a small amount of the reason for the mortality, but there is still 25% unknown cause. So there's a lot of research that still needs to be done. And that is kind of one of the main things that the DNR's plan is. So the first thing that they've done actually back in '08 was no more moose hunting. The Native American tribes in the northern region have limited amounts of permits that they can have. And since all of this is basically related to climate change, there's the general response. Let's reduce greenhouse gases, try and increase carbon storage, restore and preserve the habitats, and expand and coordinate the monitoring programs, improving communication between the DNR, the Wildlife Federation, and other volunteer organizations in the state that are all contributing to the research part of this. The problems that we're running into is, of course, just a lack of general support. People hear about the moose story, and yeah, it's sad, but I mean, how many people are really moved to get up and do something about it? You can imagine how much money needs to go into the research. This is happening so quick, the populations are dropping so quickly that research needs to happen now. So you need to have a lot of people involved, a lot of great technology, and a lot of communication. All of that takes money. Combine that with education and just general preservation of moose. And there's kind of the part that's slowing things down. Old habits die hard. Hunters are still going to want to hunt, and people still are going to want to drive their SUVs and use the electricity and fossil fuels that they have, just because that's the more convenient way, especially in our country. So those are the problems to mitigation in the world of the moose. But I'm kind of ringing the same bell that we have been forever. It's the same type of problem we're running into worldwide. So unfortunately, here's the sad piece. A glimpse of the future of the northeastern Minnesota moose populations. Basically, I mean, if things continue the way they're continuing, it's kind of obvious what's going to happen. The moose population is just going to be gone here in Minnesota. That doesn't mean they're going to be extinct. Basically, the habitat is just dwindling here in our state. So they are going to be leaving Minnesota and hopefully surviving in Manitoba area and further out into Canada. And then in the western United States, there's some habitats out there as well, and actually in the Maine region. But overall, their populations out west as well as in Canada are also dropping, and Canada has also ceased all hunting. So there's a lot of research that still needs to be done. It is linked to climate change, and we're going to kind of have to see how things go as more research is put together. So you can do your part and spread the word about what's going on here in Minnesota. I know I'd appreciate it. This is a pretty sad story, and it was awful depressing to do the research. So if you're interested, I do have obviously my sources provided here, and my paper will be attached as well. So thank you for your time. I apologize. It was 8 minutes. So have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.